Diamond cuts. That's the focus of tonight's angle. The snow and ice at Davos hasn't completely frozen out all common sense. J.P. Morgan's chief, Jamie Dimon, is slowly thawing to the idea that business should not be taking sides against hardworking Americans.
I think we should stop insulting the other side, including MAGA. A lot of people are voting for President Trump not because they believe in his family values, but they look at some of the things he did.
He grew the economy. He was right about NATO. They spend more money. He was right about all of that. He was right that these regulations don't cause positive output. Now, Dimon's a typical Wall Streeter. He's a liberal on social issues, but he's moderate on fiscal issues. But he's no dummy. He sees what we've been warning about for so many years, that if the Democrats stay joined to the hard left, they're eventually going to lose influence and credibility. And Lord knows, if you want to avoid what happened at Disney after its fight with conservatives, you shouldn't want to throw in the likes of these people.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Of course I want to punch him in the face.
Right. He's an asshole. He is so dangerous.
Because Trump speaks to the middle class, right? The working class. They consider him, well, to be an enemy. And then the working class considers attacks on Trump really to be attacks on them and their way of life.
And I think the Democrats should be a little more thoughtful when they talk about MAGA and say, why? Not like, and then don't act like every attribute of Trump is an attribute of them. It's just not true.
Correct. And likewise, it's a mistake for all the business leaders to weigh in on the side of the far left on social and racial issues as well. Now, nothing was more embarrassing than when CEO after CEO came out to pronounce on George Floyd's death as if he were Martin Luther King Jr.
Companies like ours must speak up as allies to the Black Lives Matter movement.
We were on record back in 2016 in supporting a Black Lives Matter.
Business leaders cannot remain silent on important issues, whether it's racial equity, gender equity.
Now, the country is not systemically racist, but many of them say it is. And instituting DEI policies that discriminate against non-minorities, that is systemically racist. And that's what they do. But the backlash is building against the hyper-politicization of business, and it's not going to end well for these corporate titans who thought that their trans flag pins and net zero pledges was going to save them. You see, the left is never satisfied. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile and a pound of flesh. And eventually, you're going to get run over completely. They accuse Trump of being a dictator, but they're the Stalinists. They require complete loyalty or else. Just ask Elon Musk. Now, the left once adored him, but now he's one of their top enemies just because he's actually in favor of free speech. Think about that. And if top execs think their cooperation with the left helps kind of create a cool factor, they should think about that again. World Economic attendees paid tens of thousands of dollars hoping to hobnob with Bono and Zelensky, but instead they heard what passes as an enlightened presentation. But seriously, the business community has enough trouble on its hands without getting dragged down further by the nihilists on the left. Walter Russell Mead, writing in the Wall Street Journal, perfectly captured how the global elites have humiliated themselves by creating a mess of things and then insulting the working class. Writing that the real scandal of Davos isn't that it's taking over the world, it's that it's failing. Why would voters expect an expert class that was so wrong for so long about Russia, China, Iran, and COVID to know how to cope with a challenge as difficult and multifaceted as the energy transition? And this is my favorite part. The emperor has no clothes. That's the cry of populists everywhere. To render this message ineffective, Davos man doesn't need image consultants and disinformation specialists. he needs to get dressed. Now, I've been giving a lot of unsolicited advice this week that's gotten me in some trouble and offended some people, but why am I going to stop now? So my strong suggestion to the business community is that your foolish alliance with the hard left has got to end. Start trying to appeal more to just regular people, regular Americans, and in return, populist conservative leaders are going to give you sound tax and regulatory policies, sensible judges on the courts, and they'll also protect you from the crazies on the far left. Now, you've heard President Trump, who says he's going to work with Democrats, not against them, and he wants to clean up the cities by cracking down on crime and stopping the influx of migrants that none of us can absorb. So someone like Jamie Dimon and his firm, J.P. Morgan, and frankly, most American CEOs would benefit enormously from these policies, and he's smart enough to know that. More prosperity and freedom creates more innovation. In exchange for all of this, these business bigwigs have to give the regular people something. They have to be flexible on some issues. You have to be flexible on decoupling from China, on fighting maybe fewer wars, stronger border enforcement, ending DEI and other woke policies that discriminate on the basis of race and conflict with parental rights. The evidence is overwhelming that the alliance between the business community and the left has been a really, really bad fit. All it's done is fuel pointless controversies and offend patriotic, hardworking Americans. So the Davos divas need to wake up enough to realize that their relationship with the far left is toxic. It's time to break it off, and it's time to get back to business. And that's The Angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.